It's important to me that the entire story is being told as opposed to bits and pieces, because that's what's happening. We tell things in bits and pieces instead of the entire narrative. We've got to get back to doing that.
This story can't die because people in America are trying to whitewash our history. We can't let that happen. And it's up to people like me and you too now that you're in the land of America to make sure this story and other stories like this go over have two sides and intend for that legacy to be carried on to them and their children. So it's important. You can't let it go. You can't let it go.
You gotta keep it afloat.
My great-grandmother's mother was born in Africa, and she was brought over on the last slave ship to come to America, the Clotilda, and they had to settle here. They were forced to settle here, and that's where my lineage on my African side comes from. My mother is Filipino, and so she came to America by marrying my father.
I am a fifth-generation descendant of Lottie Kanko Dennison, who was one of the captives on the Clotilda. And we're here in Mobile, Alabama, where she and many of the others ended up settling after the Civil War.
One of the things that caught my attention is the city or the town of Africatown in America. That was mind-blowing to me. Like, there's a place in America called the Africatown.
And Brian, do you know that there's a second place up in Seattle that uses that same name?
That same name?
It uses the name of Africatown. It was a community, from what I can understand, that African Americans lived in when there was a migration of African Americans to the Seattle area to work in the factories during World War II. And through time, that community was sort of abandoned as people moved into other communities in that area. But recently, they have built some new housing in that community, and it's really being redeveloped. But it just calls itself, I think, Africatown. And we have a tendency to refer to our Africatown as Africatown, USA.
Okay.
To set us apart.
So
Yes.
over there, I don't know if you're privy to it. Over there, do they do the same things you guys are doing here? You guys seem to be very proud.
And our tradition is so different. That Africatown, USA, or our Africatown, as I like to say, is so unique in the sense that it was actually founded by Africans and not African Americans. See, the Clotilda ancestors arrived in 1860. They were in bondage only 5 years.
Okay.
So the Civil War started right after they arrived, early 1860, whatever it was.
So they were only slaves for 5 years.
Only 5 years. And they knew what freedom was.
So these are people that had a language that they came with from Africa.
Language and traditions and basic culture.
Okay.
And in the other Africatown, it was founded by people who had been born in the United States.
Born into slavery.
And born into slavery. Or at least their ancestors had been born into slavery.
First time in Alabama, first time in Mobile, first time in Africatown. For the first time in America, I have felt at home.
Good.
You know, coming all the way from Kenya to America and coming here, I mean, I feel home. This is, for the first time, I feel I am among my people.
Yes,
For the
you
first
are.
time, I feel like these people are Africans. You know what I mean? I will even remove the word American on it and just leave it African.
Okay.
So this is what I feel. So tell me something about Africatown, because I believe there is something about Africatown.
Africatown is what I consider sacred soil, simply because the Africans, and we have to make sure we remember and understand, these people at one time were free. They were placed into slavery. They were not born into slavery, which is a big difference from what most people in America had to deal with. And fortunately, they were only slaves for 5 years. When that 5-year period was up, they were free once again. So they were used to being free people. And I think that's one reason why they were able to flourish as quickly as they did, because they were used to being free in the beginning. So they just went back to what they were. And that's also why they tried to hold on to many of their family traditions when they were brought to America. So they tried to hold on to what they had in Africa, but at the same time, they incorporated some of the New World's traditions into what they're doing too, simply by them being here.
Finally, loose borders and Africatown is going into Mobile's registry.
Well, Lewis Quarters is in the historic registry of the state of Alabama. And that had not happened earlier, because when the application was made for Africatown to be on the national registry, they limited the area that the application covered. And Lewis Quarters was not a part of that application.
Okay.
And most likely it was not, because some effort had been made in the 1980s to get recognition for Africatown, and that national agency that grants that recognition refused to, because at that time one of the criteria was that there was notable buildings or artifacts or something left on the property from its original founding. And unfortunately, when Africatown was settled by the Africans, the materials and things that they had to build their homes did not last, and there was no effort to preserve.
Okay, just before we lose some of our viewers for not understanding what we're talking about here, it all starts with the Clotilda ship, right?
Right.
The last ship to import slaves from Africa, African slaves into America.
You know, there's some controversy about that too. Some people used to think the Wanderer was the last one, but I think and recently somebody printed an article in the New York Times that was still trying to convince people that the Wanderer was the last one. But it came off of the coast of Georgia around Jekyll Island, and it received notoriety because the crew were prosecuted. And Clotilda's crew were able to hide or provide nobody had the proof because the ship had been burned. Whereas the Wanderer, with all of its captives and the crew, were contained. So some people thought the Wanderer was the last one, but there's evidence now that the Wanderer probably came landed somewhere between 6 and 9 months before Clotilda.
Okay, and talking of slave ships, I've heard some say, oh, we did not come here on slave boats. We have been here, and this is our land. Then white men came here, found us here, and enslaved us and all of that. And took our culture, took our names and all of that kind of stuff. But my question is, after the archaeological breakthrough by finding the remains of the Clotilda, what would you tell Black Americans that are still grappling with the idea of slavery?
I don't know why people would think they were already here. The only people, to my knowledge, that are native to this part of the world would have been Native Americans. And so we had to have come from somewhere. And the origin wasn't here. And from our general appearance, the continent of Africa would be where we came from. So I don't know how people can just disregard. I know that I have the advantage, and my other people who had ancestors on the Clotilda, we actually know who got off of the slave ship. So that does give us an ownership that maybe other people don't. But it's not sensical to me to think that if you are a person of our hue, our hair texture, that the origins wouldn't be from a geographical place, that's why we look like we do. Temperatures and amount of sunlight and things like that. Nordic people are blue-eyed and blonde because of the coldness of the weather, and their noses are narrow because they have to breathe a thinner air or a different air. So why would you think that it was somewhere other than the African continent that has our origins?
There's some that say, oh, if we came from Africa, where's the proof of the ships? They say, how come we don't see the wreckage, the wreckages of the ships that brought us to America? And, they just want to wipe out all the historical records around transatlantic slave trade. So what is the Clotilda?
Very good question. We actually have evidence. We have proof that the Clotilda exists because it's been found again. And to tell you the truth, the ship was never really actually lost. There are those in the community who did not want it to be found again. But it's been documented. We have transcripts from the ship captain on what he did and how the voyage actually took place. As a matter of fact, we give tours now throughout the month to the location to where the ship actually rests in the bottom of the Mobile River, which is at 12 Mile Island, which is just north of the city of Mobile.
Introduce you to the boat and some of its safety equipment. Of course, anytime you get out on the water, you should always acquaint yourself with where your life jackets can be located. We have more than enough to go around. You see they're all up there in the rafters. If a situation should arise where we felt those were necessary, we would make an announcement. We actually get them down, put them on, help those around you.
And so I got a question. Was anyone here on the boat here July of 1860? Can I get a hey? Anybody here in 1860? You were, okay. Could you tell me what way did y'all come in at?
In the spirit.
In the spirit. That's a good answer. That's a good answer. So I say that because we are storytellers. Everybody came out through their life in a different time. So everybody's journey's been different. So my story may be different from Jocelyn and from Jackie, and we are just learning. So we might get a couple of little things wrong, but it's a learning process. Remember, we found the boat May of 2019. So we're just a few years in on still researching and researching. So if you find something that we say that's not correct, fact check us, we'll correct ourselves, and we'll get the information that's sent over to you.
They treated him like a king when he arrived. Now we talk about Captain Timothy Mayer, Captain Foster, but rarely, and he arrived in, which is present day Benin, Kingdom of the Congo was the present day Benin today. So 11 March and he arrived in May. And he left in March and then he arrived in May. So it's just not your regular arrival. That, like you say, this is the mayor's property. If you watch the film Descendant, Ben Raines talks about if you want to hide something, you would want to put it in your front yard. And a lot of ways you can know what property belongs to the mayor family is that marker. I don't know if you can see this red concrete marker. So we all tell the story differently, and I like to say that it was a rediscovery of the ship because it was never lost. If you watch the film Descendant, there was a man named Jack Friend in the 90s. He also went to look for the Clotilda, but he ran out of funds. It's always been here, but Ben Raines was the one who was able to go and search for Clotilda. And then Dr. Jim Delgado were able to come in with sonars.
Hold my hand, Lord. Hold my hand. Hold the way from earth to heaven. I want Jesus to hold my hand.
We have not forgotten. We will not forget. Ashe. 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 Ashe adukwe omyo.
And before doing the libation ceremony, I have to get permission from the eldest person in the room. So do we have anyone that's 70 plus?
I'm 70. Back here too. 74. How young are you now? 82.
82. So she out trumps you.
Somebody's 82?
Mama, that son right behind you. Yes. Do I have your permission to move forward with the ceremony? And we use a word, ashe. Ashe means amen. So be it and go forth. And what we want to do is honor those who were aboard the ship. We talk about the ship, which I understand. We're here at the site of the Clotilda, but let us not be remiss to not recognize those who were aboard the ship. Those who came over, those were those that were unknown, right? Because there were many ships that came through. So, and we know Clotilda was the last known documented slave ship, but there were millions that were not documented. My ancestors were documented. They became U.S. citizens. Some of my friends cannot trace their roots back, but I can. So, by beginning this libation ceremony, I will pour water for those that are unknown. I ask everyone to participate with me. You can call out any of your ancestors, those who have gone before us, to help you on your journey. Okay? So, for the unknown.
Ashe.
Maggie Lewis.
Ashe.
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 Edith Graves.
Ashe.
Amanda Styles.
Ashe.
Clotilda McCreer.
Ashe.
Arzuma Livingston.
Ashe.
My mother, Linda Clemens.
Ashe.
Jane Spencer.
Ashe.
Louise Washington.
Ashe.
Emmanuel Spencer.
Ashe.
Ashe.
Hazel Dean Brady.
Ashe.
Doris Cooks.
Ashe.
Barbara C. Jones.
Ashe.
Maddie Williams.
Ashe.
Van Bird.
Ashe.
Anna Gamble.
Ashe.
Ruby Big Water.
Ashe.
Will Cardigan.
Ashe.
Eric Green.
Ashe.
Charles Jones.
Ashe.
Khalil Hamilton.
Ashe.
William Fairley.
Ashe.
Beatrice McCall.
Ashe.
Clarence Moore.
Ashe.
Dora Moore.
Ashe.
Alton Bird.
Ashe.
Inez Bird.
Ashe.
Amy and Africatown.
Ashe. Ashe.
John Green.
Ashe.
Jerome Ferrier.
Ashe.
And we say Ashe, Ashe, and Ashe. Asheo. Today is a very special day for me and my family. We celebrated 155 years of establishment of Lewis's Quarters. And today, for a special treat today, we have an actress here today who plays my ancestor in one of the plays in Africatown, An Ocean in My Bones. So I'm going to hand it over to Maggie Lewis.
You won't find many photos about me in the history books. Actually, there are none. But let me tell you my story. The year was 1860. It was dark and our area was disrupted by the Dahomey warriors. They took us away from everything that we loved, our families, and even the land that we had built, our homes. They marched us down to the barracoons. In the barracoons, there were a lot of us. We were from different tribes,
different areas. And then they put us on that ship, the Clotilda. 1860, we traveled to Mobile, Alabama. When they took us off the ship, we were divided up and taken several different places. But let me just go back for a minute and tell you about my shipmate, my husband, Oluwale. We were shipmates. I don't think that I would have made it if it wasn't for my shipmate, for my Oluwale. When Colonel Thomas Buford purchased us, we were given different names. I told you my shipmate name was Oluwale. But since no one could spell that because it was an African name, they called him Charlie Lewis. They called Kazula Cujo Lewis. Now, does that sound like Oluwale to you? Well, since they were giving out names and basically putting anything on that paper that they wanted to, when they got to me, I told them my name is America. I'm pretty sure those white boys got that spelling right. They could pronounce that. The year is now 1865. They told us we were free. Basically, we were free to leave their land, to get out of their hair. But what was we to do? We had worked 5 years for free already, and now you're just going to let us go? Okay, that's fine. But free from what? We had no money. We had our skills from Africa. I was a cultivator. I knew how to grow things out of the land. So I was selling my field peas and my okra down at the market. Baby, you want to buy these? Thank you. Now, my husband, Oluwale, he was a grave digger. Can you imagine that? You stole a man from Africa, and now he got to dig graves. Okay. Well, eventually, of course, we wanted to go back to where you stole us from. You didn't have permission to bring us here. Take us back, Timothy Mayer. But he told us he wasn't taking us nowhere. So, as the community, we got ourselves together. We weren't going back to Africa, so we had to work our way back. We had no clue what to do, so we sold our vegetables, as I did. Charlotte dug those graves, and in 1870, April 5th, 1870, 155 years ago today, we saved $200 along with others to purchase 7 acres of land. Can you imagine that? 5 years after being freed from slavery, we purchased land because of the things that we saved up. We had to find our way. We called our 7 acres of land Lewis Quarter. Lewis Quarter is still there today. Now, we had help with others, building our house. Anybody who purchased anything was able to buy land and build houses. We just helped each other out. We were a community. We stayed together. If anybody needed help, somebody was going to help you. Charlene was considered as a chief in the community because he was one of the older ones. He was very mind-strong, and even though Colonel Buford tried to break my husband, he couldn't break my husband. He stayed strong. So, we built our houses, and we had 5 beautiful children. Maggie, Martha, Mary, Richard, and Joseph. You probably can see a picture of my husband somewhere in the history book, Charlie Lewis, but he will always be a little late to me. No pictures of me, nowhere to be found. But I do want you to know, now we're up to 7 generations in this Lewis family. When you look at me, you're looking at my family. In my family, I have historians. I have educators. I have a lot of college graduates with degrees. And just like us, homeowners and landowners.